Okay, so with that all said, here's Larry Gross to tell us about the 1904 Olympics.
Thank you very much. What an honor it is. We're talking about the 1904 Olympics, and we're on the grounds of a venue of the 1904 Olympics. That's pretty special. The World's Fair Society has had an Olympics presentation every 4 years for the Summer Games about the 1904 Olympics. So we started in '86. That means our first one was in 1988. Does anyone remember where that was held? Ooh, nobody. Seoul, Korea. Can you hear me? Okay.
Stay close to the mic.
Closer. Okay. I'm using our founder, Max Starm, our late founder, Max Starm's PowerPoint. He spent many hours collecting the images of the athletes you'll see. So I'm dedicating this to him. At a certain point, yeah, and Shara Starm is here today. I'm so glad she is. So as Mike said, Max and I wrote that book together about the medals. And I'm not a 1904 Olympics expert, but I think you'll enjoy what the two of us have come up with. Now, Max put a lot of things on his slides, and I tried not to change them too much. I've added slides to do a few things. But I'm not going to talk about everything you see on the slides, just maybe some highlights or some, I hope everything is kind of interesting tidbits. Please, if you would, save questions until after it's over. So for my take on this presentation, I would ask you to consider in your minds as we go along, was our version of the Olympics good for the games? Or was it a weak offering? Sometimes it's considered a joke or a laughing stock. I hope what you may learn here today will make you better able to respond to others about our Olympics. There's a program Max had from his collection, you can see, for the Olympics. Of course, the 1904 Olympics were completely entwined with, oops, how did that happen? Oh. Okay, we're completely entwined with the World's Fair. Many important figures were involved with both. The fairgrounds incorporated most of the Olympic venues, and the Olympic venues are on the maps of the fair. The games were incorporated into the schedule of the fair. They were publicized as fair events. Now, the pros of that is that the Olympics gained prestige and publicity. It's only the third Olympics, and certainly gained attendance by being part of the fair. The cons of that are the Olympics maybe were overshadowed by the fair and considered or treated somewhat as a stepchild. It's important in our story to note that the original Olympics committee was adamant that the Olympics be held every 4 years, not every year. So the first one, well, I shouldn't say the first one, from the ancient times, we know the Olympic Games were held in Greece in 776 BC. The modern Olympics started in Athens, Paris, St. Louis, and I put Tokyo in there. The Summer Olympics have been canceled 3 times, and they were postponed to this odd year because of COVID. And of course, we have the Paris Olympics coming up. Now, here's a figure that's important to our story. Pierre de Coubertin was the father of the modern Olympics. He more or less thought it up. He was a visionary and idealist. He was a founder of the International Olympics Committee, which still runs the Olympics, and he was the president of that from 1896 to 1925. It's a long time. There is a Coubertin medal associated with the Olympics. It's a sportsmanship type of a medal. That was inaugurated in '64. More about him as we go. Another important figure is James Sullivan. He was in charge of the games on the ground here in St. Louis. Coubertin, head of the Olympics Committee, never attended the St. Louis Olympics. He was a Parisian and he stayed there. So Sullivan, actually Coubertin didn't like St. Louis very much. So Sullivan, who was from Chicago, originally supported the Chicago games, but to his credit, he was persuaded that St. Louis would be a better choice in '04. He founded the Amateur Athletics Union and was heavily involved in the high turnout of U.S. athletes to participate. He believed in the ideal of amateur athletics all his life. He has an award, that trophy you see, first presented to Bobby Jones that Tim mentioned. Ever since, a lot of exceptional athletes have gotten that award: Wilma Rudolph, Mark Spitz, and Jackie Joyner-Kersee. So it's kind of interesting coming back around to St. Louis. Unfortunately, he also believed in the natural athletic superiority of white people. Now, many other people believed that at the time also, but he advocated this position actively. Another important figure, not so much for running the Olympics, but the president of the fair was also called the president of the Olympics. And the honorary president was Theodore Roosevelt, the president. David Francis did attend certain events and ceremonies, and he contributed one of the trophies. Now, we even had, I think, a presentation about picking St. Louis for the Olympics. On May 21st, 1901, Chicago was named by the Olympics Committee as the city where the Olympics would be held. But then 22 months later, the same group chose St. Louis. So what happened? The important thing that happened was St. Louis moved the fair from 1903 to 1904. There wouldn't have been any reason to choose St. Louis because there was no Olympics, of course, in 1903. In fact, a person went from St. Louis to talk about being in the Olympics, even if we were going to have the fair in 1903, but it didn't get anywhere. Another thing that helped St. Louis out is the prestige kept building around our World's Fair. Our fair was getting the backing of the U.S. government in a big way. It was going to be a huge event. While Coubertin had a terrible experience tying the Olympics to a World's Fair in Paris, the IOC recognized the boost the Olympics would get being part of the fair. Chicago originally seemed to be the better choice. They talked big about using a lot of the University of Chicago's facilities, and they were going to build a 75,000 seat stadium. Think about that. Their influential head of the Chicago group went to Coubertin in Paris to make his case. Coubertin wasn't very impressed, and the backing for Chicago was falling apart. Meanwhile, St. Louis became a stronger contender because of the prestige of Congress extending $5 million in working capital to the fair. So that was a good thing. Now, this may seem below the belt to some people, but St. Louis threatened to hold their own games while the Olympics were going to be in Chicago. Now, you could say it's a little, pushy, but St. Louis was simply saying athletics were very popular, and the fair wanted to have some kind of big athletic event at the time. So all of these factors made St. Louis the winner. They got the fair on the Olympics on February 10th, 1903, with a telegram, you have the Olympic Games. Now, what exactly were the Olympic Games? Oops, I did it again. There were first the International Olympics Committee itself hadn't cast in stone which sports and games were going to be called Olympic. We know golf was dropped, for instance, after 1904. It wasn't helped by James Sullivan. He was in charge. He wanted to promote athletics, so he wanted to have an athletic event every day of the fair. And while it didn't turn out that bad, he corralled many athletic events and just called them Olympic. So that created confusion. So instead of the usual 2-week concentrated games, the so-called Olympic Games took place over 7 months. But when you look at the Olympic schedule, among other events called Olympic, there was an elementary schools championship, a public schools track meet, and a Turner, that's that exercise physical fitness groups that were popular. They put 3,500 people on the field for an exhibition. That was called Olympic. Even at the time, though, there was a distinction made between all the events and the core track and field Olympic events we recognize between August 29th and September 3rd, 1904. This confusion still creates problems when it comes to medals, sorting out medals and so forth, which ones are Olympic and which are not. Did I do that right? Yes. No, I didn't. The participating nations who came to the Olympics, part of the knock on St. Louis is the lack of worldwide competition, which Tim referred to. As you can see, only 12, possibly 15 countries participated. But then in 1896, only 14, in 1900, 24, 1908, 22. So I don't know that St. Louis was that much out of line. Of course, it was difficult to travel to St. Louis in 1904, especially if you're an athlete in Europe. There were some American citizens who, because of ethnicity, competed for other countries. Only 5 countries have participated in every Summer Olympics. You might think Greece would be one of them, and that's true. France, Britain. I think it's interesting Australia has been in every Olympics, and so has Switzerland. Well, that's 5. So the United States hasn't been in every modern Olympics. Anybody remember why? Yes, in 1980, the president decided not to send the U.S. to the Olympics in Russia because they invaded Afghanistan. He lost the election that year. The venues, where were the Olympics held? Francis Field, the Olympic Stadium, you can see the events there. Next to it, a physical culture building or gymnasium was built. The U.S. life-saving lake, I'll talk about in a second, and of course the marathon course, and besides the Creve Coeur Lake for rowing, where we are right now. So on the fair maps, the circle part is where prominent Olympic venues were. The fair maps are always sort of upside down. South is up and to the right is west. So the Washington U's current athletic field, you can see the arrow pointing to it. Next to it, the gym. Over on the left, the U.S. life-saving lake is not there now. That's the corner of Wydown and Skinker. Did it again. Today, if you go over to the France's Olympic field, you can see these gates. They didn't exist at the time of the Olympics. They're really something to see, and it's a really nice way of commemorating the Olympics. Okay, so here's a within the last 10 years, a kind of modern look at Francis Field. That arrow is pointing to University City Hall, City Hall, trees blocking it, but we can go back in time and see the Olympians. And that same building is there back in 1904. And then they modified the original physical culture building to become a kind of first-class fitness center for the students at Washington U. There's another look at the Olympic field in 1904. Typical is a 3rd-mile track, and other games are conducted on the infield at the same time. The bottom shows a fairly recent look at the stadium, and the top photo is from the Olympics, probably the marathon. Look at all the people. Okay, so I mentioned the Francis Gymnasium was expanded to become the fitness center in 2016. There's also an Olympics ring sculpture nearby. If you haven't seen that, go over there and get your picture taken. St. Louis is still only one of the 3 U.S. cities that's held a summer games. And that's pretty special. As you know, our Olympics instituted the medals that continue on to this day, the gold, silver, and the bronze. These hadn't been, before that, trophies were given out, as I think Tim referred to, and those trophies weren't standardized, but the gold, silver, and bronze were. So here's opening day at the Olympics, and it looks kind of like the way it does today, right? No? Okay, I'm going to go through some of the events and just to point out some things that I think you'll find interesting. Archery only had people from the United States, was part of the U.S. National Championships. 2 interesting facts. The oldest Olympian to win a gold medal, Galen Spencer, was 64 in our Olympics. And the only women in the 1904 Olympics were in archery. And one of them was really good. Lyda Howell won 3 gold medals. She had won 17 national championships in her career, and that really adds credibility to our games. She was very good. Tennis was an elimination tournament played on dirt courts near the Physical Culture Building. There were other tennis matches and tournaments played as part of the World's Fair, but not Olympic. A famous athlete and benefactor of tennis participated in the Olympics. He was eliminated pretty early, and that was Dwight Davis. And of course, even before our Olympics, he had established the Davis Cup, and that's still a very prestigious tennis tournament. And there's the Davis Cup, looks a little like the Stanley Cup with all the names they've had to add over the years. Weightlifting, all around dumbbell, refers to the event, not the participants. Oscar Osthoff set a world's record. Keep that in mind, not an Olympics record. He's had a world record of 194.5 pounds. And that's a theme I'll repeat. His record adds credibility to the 1904 level of competition. While he wasn't competing against weightlifters who came to our Olympics, he was competing against their records. So Oscar became the best in the world with his lift right here in St. Louis. These 2 pictures are iconic with our Olympics because they're often used if there's an article written about them. Fred Winters was another world-class lifter. 2 weeks before the Olympics, he broke the world record by lifting 141 pounds with one hand from the ground to over his head. But I think Art did that the other day, didn't you? The two-hand lift, that's a nice photo of the gold winner. His lift was 60 pounds better than second place. Wrestling had 7 events. For the first time, weight classes were included in wrestling. All the wrestling was Greco-Roman freestyle, similar to the ancient games, which the artwork below shows you, except at our Olympics, they wore clothes. Wrestling is a category that shows the list of countries participating can get muddled. 2 of the 42 wrestlers were 2 of them were Norwegians who were in the United States wrestling for this country. Norway has since contended that because neither was a citizen, they should be listed as wrestling for Norway. All right, I want to take out time to just mention something about physical culture. I keep saying the gymnasium was called the Physical Culture Building. And I want to show the relationship between the Olympics and the fair. This headline or header from the World's Fair Bulletin 1903 shows that the World's Fair supported physical culture at the fair. Now, physical culture was a movement that started in the 19th century, kind of emphasized physical fitness and physical education. That's as close as I can come to what it was all about. Well, the director of the exhibits for the fair separated the exhibits of the fair into 12 categories. The 12th one was physical culture, and the Olympics come in that slot. So there's the physical culture building. It's great to still have these things around. Physical culture building had a model gymnasium filled with sports and training equipment from A.G. Spalding's company. The building also had a lecture hall and learned papers about physical education and so forth were presented. One of the events held in that gymnasium was boxing. Boxing was introduced as a new event in the 1904 Olympics. It was still kind of fluid. Other than 1912, it has remained an event ever since. Women's boxing was a demonstration sport in 1904. As it says, women boxers were finally allowed to compete in London in 2012. So for the first time in 2012, by the way, all women competed in all summer events. This gear makes it look more like they're worried about protecting the women if they fall over than if they get hit in the head. Fencing, this slide shows that there have been 5 sports that have been represented in every Olympics: fencing, athletics, cycling, gymnastics, and swimming. Athletics was kind of a way of scoring certain athletes, combining a number of events, and you could win by getting the most points. Okay, going back to the map, there's the life-saving lake again, and it's called the U.S. Life-Saving Lake because it was used to give life-saving demonstrations. But then during the Olympics, it was also used for the swimming events. They had diving then, pretty much similar. Platform diving and the springboard they called fancy diving. There's some other pictures of this swimming events. The one at the bottom right is fairly famous and also used in articles about the Olympics. Charlie Daniels was the first gold medal winner at the St. Louis Olympics. He won the 220 and 440 yards. He makes our Olympics look good in terms of competitors because he was a multiple Olympic gold medalist and a two-time world record holder. So if you were seeing him, you're watching somebody who was world class. The breaststroke and relay were first introduced at the 1904 Olympics. Gymnastics, there's some of the events fairly similar to today. There are two terrific standouts. Anton Haida won 8 gold medals in the Olympics. And at the time, that was a record. And for a number of years after that. The other person you see, George Iser, won 3 gold, 2 silver, and a bronze on the same day. It would be hard to even schedule something like that. So he won 6 medals on one day. I'm going to add one other fact about Iser. He had a wooden leg. And there it is. And there he is. I only bring up lacrosse to mention one of the teams in the Olympics was an American Indian team, and Max always thought it was interesting to see that these names are in the Olympic record book. Now let's talk about the infamous marathon referred to earlier. Oops, did it again. Okay. It was held on Tuesday, August 30th. There were 32 runners from 4 nations. Only 14 of them finished, though. Why? I think a lot of you know. It started in the afternoon. It was 90 degrees. There were no paved roads. They were on dusty country roads. Cars followed them around to some extent, kicking up the dust. David Francis fired the starting pistol. Some runners were legit. 3 runners had won the Boston Marathon, which was in existence already. The winner in 1904 had come in 4th in the Boston. So a number of them had business out there, but quite a few didn't. Some had no training, no practice, bad shoes, and no running gear. By today's standards, the whole thing seemed to be a bit of a joke. Here's the course on the left there, using the fair map coming out of Francis Field. After 5 laps, they went west. West is to the right. And this isn't to scale, of course. Those are the what are now the streets: Forsyth, Brentwood to Manchester, up at the top, over Ballas, Clayton, Lindbergh, coming back Olive, North and South Boulevard, a bit of Merrimack and Forsyth and back. So they made 5 laps clockwise around the stadium track. It gives the fans a look. You can see there in the bottom right what the roads were like. It's just farmland or vacant land. Not another soul in sight. This is kind of interesting. 2 Botswana tribesmen, Len Tau and Jan Mashiani from South Africa, were in the Boer War exhibit. The fair, you can see the program on the right, the fair refought the Boer War on a daily basis, I think. And they used participants from the actual war in the exhibit. And these 2 had come from South Africa, but they were both long distance messenger runners in the actual Boer War. There they are. One came in 9th and one came in 12th. You could see they did not have, also did not have Olympic gear. And Tim referred to this character. Felix Carbajal of Cuba was 5 feet tall, a former mailman. He ran a lot in Cuba. He wanted to go to the Olympics. When he got to New Orleans, he gambled on dice and lost all his money. So he had to hitchhike or walk to St. Louis. He showed up for the race wearing a long sleeve shirt, long pants, a beret, and heavy street shoes. A fellow runner cut off his pants to make shorts at least out of them. He was one of the best athletes in the race, but he lost almost 60 minutes stopping to chat with people along the route. He ate peaches while he ran. He supposedly hadn't eaten in 40 hours. I don't get that. He ended up with a stomach ache, so he took a nap. A dog chased him off the course for a while. Now, the Fred Loers incident, which I think you all know about, but this one thing I think gave the entire 1904 Olympics a black eye, because the punchline is a guy even hitched a ride to win the marathon. Well, not exactly. That is him in that car. At the 9-mile point, Loers developed cramps and gave up the race. So he hitched a ride back to the stadium, but he kind of recovered from the cramps and he decided to get out and run the final part. Now, a race official ordered him off the course, but he explained he was just going to run back. That's how he would get back. So that's one person who knew he wasn't the winner. Loers ran by the leader who was struggling. So the only reason the leader kept up was because he was told that Loers was out of the race. Loers ran into the stadium, finished the final lap. Well, the crowd cheers. They thought he'd won. He claims he was never trying to pass himself off as the winner. James Sullivan was incensed about this and he banned him from amateur competition for life. But it must have all been explained because that was rescinded and Loers won the Boston Marathon in 1905 without using a car. The actual winner was Thomas Hicks. He was in a daze most of the time, or a lot of the time. Hicks was helped by two men. You see that bottom photo in the last 10 miles. Sometimes they propped him up, holding his arms. He was third for a long time, but the people in front of him dropped out. They couldn't continue. A few other things. A sponge was used to moisten his mouth. He took a couple of doses of strychnine and egg white to stimulate him. Yeah, I know. A little strychnine apparently was a stimulant. Warm water from a car radiator was used to give him a full body sponge bath. No, he didn't drink. He didn't drink. He could barely break the tape when he won, and he fell into the arms of a dozen people. The Chicago Athletic Association protested the win, not for the help he got, that was okay, but because he had two pace cars to help him. His time was 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 53 seconds. It's slow, but not bad considering the circumstances. So on the positive side of this, the marathon, it created a huge interest, 10,000 spectators, and being only the third Olympics, it showed that this event should be continued. Alice Roosevelt attended the marathon. Quite a few of the participants were qualified long-distance runners, but the course was so brutal, they dropped out or couldn't continue. And lessons were obviously learned for future marathons. Maybe start in the morning, something like that. My opinion is if you take out Loers riding a car, this marathon, while grueling, was legit. Turning to track, 3 names stand out. For the short distances, Archie Hahn. For the middle, Harry Hillman. And for the long distances, James Lightbody. Archie Hahn won all 3 of the short races, the gold. He won the 102 consecutive Olympics. a feat not equaled until 1988 by anyone? Carl Lewis. That name. Max got these great shots. That's we'll talk about. He was given a trophy, a loving cup. Harry Hillman, the middle distance runner in the 400 and the hurdles. And James Lightbody, for no other reason, I think we should note this man because he, to me, has the greatest name in track and field. Lightbody. He legitimized our games by setting a world record for the 1,500-meter race. World records show our Olympics were competitive. Going back to Hillman and the hurdles, some good pictures there. The first African-American to win a medal in a modern-day Olympics was George Coleman, either Page or Pouage. After the Olympics, he stayed in St. Louis and taught at Sumner High School. The one from Sumner. This bottom photo is reproduced a lot. It's so great to have two medal winners in the same photo with the physical culture building in the background, which is still there. Jumping. One name seems to stand out. Ray Uri. He won all these standing jumps, which I don't believe they have anymore. Self-explanatory. Meanwhile, the running high jump was won by Samuel Jones. These are good pictures. Did you know the Olympics was so well covered photographically? Yeah. Max Storm put these together. Now, here's an example of the Loving Cup that were given the winners in track and field events, but I thought we had medals. Well, the traditional way of giving an amateur some kind of prize that wasn't cash or goods or of some kind was these elaborate trophies. Well, in our Olympics, just because we turned to the medals, maybe the athletes, wanted something a little more than now suddenly just something you hold in your hand. So they still had the Loving Cups, and they're really good looking too. There's a table full of them ready to be handed out. There were 20 events that had cups as additional awards, all sponsored by prominent people at the time. They're all unique and elaborate and, no standardization. David Francis gave the marathon one, the Lemp brothers, Isaac Taylor, A.G. Spalding. Let's get back to Ray Uri. Look at how many gold he won in 3 different Olympics. That's really amazing. Very difficult. There he is doing it's called the human frog. He had polio when he was a boy. He was in a wheelchair, but he sort of exercised his way out of it. That bottom one is the standing high jump from standing still. This stamp was issued for Ray Uri in 1990. As I said, he had 8 gold medals altogether. There's the broad jump, running and standing. Now, this is one of the best examples of our Olympics having legitimacy. Ray Uri set a standing long jump world record at about 11.5 feet. So if critics say these athletes in St. Louis were competing against hard competition from around the world, they were competing against their records, and he broke that record. There's an advertisement on the left using the photo Max found. The triple jump was called a hop, step, and jump. Now, Meyer Prinstein won that for the running one. I mention him because he's a good example of the possible confusion of just what you're rooting for in 1904. Prinstein was Jewish. He was born in Poland. He became a U.S. citizen. And in 1904, he represented the Irish American Athletic Club. There's some good pole vault pictures. Since 5 people broke the old record, I just wonder if maybe some new technique or pole was developed before the Olympics. Throwing things. Well, that's kind of what it is. John Flanagan is another good example of world-class competitor. He won gold in 1900 and 1904, called the greatest hammer thrower of the 20th century. He set 18 world records and won 7 AAU hammer championships. So if you saw him, a big deal. In the discus, 2 really good athletes tied. So a throw-off was required in those days where they had 3 more throws. Sheridan made a world record discus throw. Oh, he won, by the way. Ralph Rose and Martin Sheridan. I should have named them. While in St. Louis, non-Olympic, he set a world record discus throw. I don't know whether you know about this guy. There was something called the 56-pound weight throw. Well, a Montreal police officer was good at that, Etienne Desmarteau, but he went to track meets on the weekends because he was a police officer in Montreal. And he wanted to go to the Olympics. He wasn't allowed a leave of absence, so he went anyway, and he was fired. Well, while here, he won the gold medal, the first gold medal in the modern Olympics won by Canada. So when he came back, he had a hero's welcome. All Canada was proud of him. So somehow the police department lost his papers when they fired him. I read that. So I guess he was rehired or allowed to stay. So the lesson is, if you win a gold medal, you can probably get your old job back. Ralph Rose was great at throwing things. He was a fan favorite. The fact that he won in 2 more Olympics with more international competition shows that spectators were seeing a top-notch performer. His measured distance toss, 48 feet 7 inches, beat all the other athletes' performances in shot put in the whole world. By the way, outside of the marathon, our 1904 games were conducted very well. The judges, the measuring, you can see in some of these pictures, the people are right on the, I'm sorry. You can see in this picture, the judges are right on the spot for everything. And there was never any rumors of being biased or rigged in any way. Well, I had golf slides in here, but Tim did such a good job. You can look at the pictures, but I am not going to add anything. I think you had this course picture. There's the winner. There's the medal and the trophy you mentioned. Okay. This is one of the lasting mistakes of the 1904 Olympics, was this debacle, Anthropology Days. It was a 2-day event, August 12th and 13th. The idea was that members of the native or primitive peoples who were on exhibit at the World's Fair would compete with white athletes, but on the first day, it was all Olympic-style athletic contests for which the native people had no familiarity or experience. Why did they do this? The idea was hatched by James Sullivan. I told you about his problem. And William McGee, the head of the Department of Anthropology. McGee said he was a social scientist collecting data to compare among native peoples. Sullivan was a racial purist, and he wanted to disprove the idea that Aboriginal peoples living more primitive lifestyles were physically superior to Anglo-Saxons. Of course, the deck was stacked against these people. He said the whole meeting proves conclusively that the savage has been a very much overrated man from an athletic point of view. As a spectacle, it was a condescending amusement. And while some performances might have been admirable, most of the native people failed. For one thing, they weren't familiar with the shot put or high jump or the long jump or the mile. Not only didn't natives get much practice for this, concepts like a starting gun and a tape at the end weren't fully understood, plus there was a language barrier. While not condemned at the time by the press, Anthropology Days steadily gained a shameful reputation, including Coubertin's condemnation in his 1931 memoirs. A couple of things to remember, though. Anthropology Days were never called Olympic at the time. No Olympic medals were given. It was a sideshow and not really part of the games. So, future Olympics, I think, start on Paris in the 26th. They come back to the United States. But since Los Angeles has already held them, we'll still be one of only 3 cities in the United States. And I don't know when the next one is in the United States after that, but St. Louis will still have a distinction. So, okay, summing up. A success or not? The minuses, not very international, as we know. Only 62 athletes out of the 651 were from foreign countries. Not many participants outside of the US. Big mistake to call all athletic events Olympic. The marathon is reflected badly on the conduct of the games and Anthropology Days. On the plus side, though, look at those judges. Our Olympics maintained and added to the Olympic tradition, and with having the gold, silver, and bronze still used. The contests were conducted rigorously, upholding Olympics standards. Excellent venues and facilities, and it was well attended. World-class athletes competed. 13 Olympic records were broken and 4 world records. Now, St. Louisans can feel proud, or those living in our area. As I said, only 3 cities have hosted summer games. We can boast the Olympic flag and the rings. You should go get your picture taken with the rings. People do when modern Olympics when they're held in other countries. Although one of the oldest, St. Louis maintains its Olympics venue. That is really amazing. Not only Glen Echo, but Francis Field, physical culture building. That's pretty special. Except for the marathon, St. Louis Games conducted honorably and up to standards. So St. Louis had definite improvements in presenting Olympics over Greece and France and continued an unbroken Olympics tradition. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I wore you out.
Talking about the, different. let's see, the different trophies that were given out,
Yes.
there's a beer stein in. Is that by chance? You
I-
know, does anybody know
I-
it's related to the?
I don't know anything about it. I know what you're talking about in that picture. I know what you're talking about in that picture. I was assuming it's a kind of trophy, but I don't know anything about it. Oh, the Lemp brothers gave a trophy. We could investigate that. Is that what you were thinking?
That's not true.
Oh,
Big beer people, and there's a beer trophy in there, and I wondered if that was their trophy. Is that
good.
right?
Well, that's a good observation. I think that needs to be pursued. Anyone else?
The military troops on the Philippines, did they participate in the Olympics or any of the athletic activities?
Well, I don't think it's such.
I don't think so.
No.
I've never read any record of the Philippine troops, the constabulary or the scouts, who were residing. There was about 300 or 400 of each of those groups on the Philippine encampment, the Philippine exhibit. And I don't think there's any record of them participating in the Olympics. The only foreign people brought as part of concessions or exhibits were the two South Africans that participated in the marathon, to my knowledge.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mike.
Were there any clothing restrictions like for the people who race? I mean, I see men in shorts. How typical was that at the time? And were there any clothing restrictions we put there?
That's a good one.
In terms of the marathon, I don't think so. All of the other events were, the participants came from athletic clubs, organizations and so forth, and I think they had standard gear for racing. So as you see in the pictures, they look, pretty typical, even similar to today. I don't know whether there were regulations as such, probably not. Maybe some things prohibited, but I don't think so. Anyone else? Oh, my goodness. It's coming.
Are you aware if there were any St. Louis residents that were participants in the Olympics?
In golf. Right? I mean, Lambert,
Yeah, about maybe sixth of the field or more in golf.
Tim is saying 6 in
No,
golf.
A sixth of the field.
Oh, a 6th
Of the field.
of the field for St. Louisans, yes. I don't know otherwise.
I don't know any.
The list, you had 600 plus athletes, so none of them have been pointed out.
Larry, I was gonna add to that. I know I saw what the Missouri Athletic Club participated.
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah, probably, I would say, yeah.
The Missouri Athletic Club, he said.
Because it's the one picture
Because
had the MAC logo.
a lot of athletic clubs, so it would make sense that. He stayed in St. Louis. I don't think he was from St. Louis. She was mentioning the African Americans one. The medal, bronze.
Since one of our minuses was
Oh,
not such international,
Well, I'll repeat it.
since that was one of the minuses in Greece and in Paris, did they have better showings from around the world?
She asked if Greece and Paris had better showings internationally. No, the Athens had 14 countries and Paris had 22. That's not a lot better.
And to me, that would be a
Yeah.
reflection on the Olympic committee, not getting to, not St. Louis necessarily, but they're.
Yeah, well, I think it's just travel in general. Oh, one thing I didn't say, countries didn't sponsor athletes. I should have mentioned that.
You did.
Oh, I did. I wasn't listening.
So did Tim.
People had to get there on their own. There weren't games played to now this person represents our country and we'll sponsor them and get them there. None of that. Anything else?
Besides diving, was there swimming competition?
Yes. Yeah, oh, yeah. I said it. Besides diving where there's swimming competition. Yes, I showed some of the people on kind of a dock that was used. Okay,
Did they bring the Olympic torch from Athens like they did now?
no. No, you don't have any much tradition going on yet. I mean, we have medals at this one. So no.
I don't think the Olympic torch started until the 20s or 30s.
Right, it takes a certain amount of sophistication to make that happen, I think.
Last question.
Did it require a separate ticket for the Olympic event from there?
The question is, did it require a separate ticket to attend Olympic events?
Well, Larry just handed me the microphone. I've never read anything that said you had to pay an extra 10 cents or 15 cents to go into the stadium to see the Olympics. On the other hand, for the Paralympics that took place, you know, over those 5 days or so, it wouldn't surprise me if there wasn't a nominal fee charged, because almost all of the concessions, exhibits, rides, etc., had a charge, but to go into the palaces was free. So that's just speculation.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I want to thank Larry for a wonderful presentation, very thorough, and we learned something, and want to thank all of you for several things. Number one, for the double feature, I want to thank our first presenter, Tim, for connecting the ball. Staff is around, but I want to thank Glen Echo for a wonderful meal and hosting us. And I want to thank you all for coming and being such a good audience and driving out here and learning a lot and asking some very good stumper questions that we didn't know or think about before. So with that, I want to just give a quick overview of some future meeting information. On Wednesday, August 14th, we'll have our annual show and tell meeting. The meeting will be held at University City Library at 6:30. It's time to look around your house to find a new or special piece of the fair and bring it and tell us your story about how you got it or what it means to you. That's Wednesday, August 14th at U City. I've got other meetings in the works, still getting them scheduled. Jan Green will probably give her Women at the Fair in November. We'll have a Zoom meeting sometime, a Zoom only meeting with a tour of Art Hill and the Grand Basin in 1904 virtually. I've seen a preview of that, as a couple of us have, and it's really cool. I'm also working on an authors program. I can find a location where we can have a few authors come and tell us about their books and sell their books. And there's also going to be a special new program by Charles Kaler at the History Museum in October. And information will be coming to you in the bulletin and emails. So keep an eye on the bulletin and emails, and we'll try to get the accurate information in there and post it on the website as far as we can in advance. I want to ask if anyone has any other questions or information about the World's Fair, the Society, or events that are happening in and around St. Louis. I just thought of something real quick. I think National Ice Cream Day is coming up real soon at the History Museum. Tomorrow. Oh, and the History Museum is going to have some ice cream events. The first 50 or 100 people get a free little ice cream from Clementine's or Serendipity. One of them.
World's Fair flavors.
And yeah, World's Fair flavor.
Ladies and gentlemen, St. Louis, Missouri is the only place that has real Olympic rigs. The International Committee sent them to St. Louis in honor of the 1904 World's Fair. They are next to the fence there around the field at Washington University. So we're the only people in the United States that has honest to goodness Olympic rigs. So, and it's right here in St. Louis.
Those rooms are dedicated, I think, Larry talked about that in 1918. If you haven't seen them, off 2020, okay, if you haven't seen them, right off of Forsyth, on the east end of the stadium area, there's a parking lot. You can drive into that parking lot and the rings are right in front of you. You can't miss them. Each ring is probably about 6 or 7 feet in diameter. They're, well, yes, the IOC voted to allow St. Louis to do that. Only places that have hosted the Olympic Games and either name something Olympic and use that word Olympic, like Francis Olympic Field or Francis Olympic Gymnasium, or put up the Olympic rings. They jealously guard that symbol and the use of that. You can't use it unless you're paying money to promote Coca-Cola as an official sponsor of the 19 or whatever it means.
Where's the Olympic flag here at this location?
One of them's on the flagpole. When you go out the door, go straight ahead across the green. And then there's also an official flag over the fireplace.
Oh.
Right next to the giant replica of the golfing gold medal. Any other questions?
Mike, I have one thing about George Lyon.
Sure, something about George Lyon.
One thing will be interested.
Because people have talked about no golf from 1904 until 2016. In fact, they planned to have golf at London in 1908. And George Lyon was supposed to defend his championship. And my understanding is he actually showed up and there was nothing. And so they were going to give him a medal again. And he said, no thanks. So.
He didn't want to win a medal by default. Huh. That was very honorable. Well, I hope you all learned something new about the Olympics and the history of the Olympics. One comment from across the room, I'll try to repeat it.
No, how beyond the front entrance to the club, there is a fountain in a circle of water, and it has a flame on it. And the idea of that is that it symbolizes the Olympic flame. Yes, just beyond the entrance to the club, there is a circle with water and there is a torch in the center of that with the flow of water into the fountain. And that symbolizes the Olympic torch. That also the spouts of the fountain, there are 5 of them, and they create rings in the water to symbolize the 5 rings of the Olympics.
There's a plaque around the rings. Take a look. I think we were just talking to a member of the family that made that fountain. And also, when you go out the door, take a look to your left. There's a nice plaque outside the door that talks about Glen Echo hosting the 1904 golf event. I think it was in one of Tim's presentation, probably, briefly perhaps, but take a look at the flag and the big medal out there. And like I said, if you want to get a replica of the gold medal, smaller version of it, keep going straight ahead across the grass to the pro shop or gift shop, etc. Again, I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed your double feature today.